We're able to live because of the hard work of our farmers. I insist to my soon-to-be father-in-law, but my words fall on deaf ears. He mocks farming as a job that's not profitable. He even laughs, challenging me to show him the life of a farmer. Fine, let him see my family farm. He'll regret his words soon enough. My name is Henry. I used to work in sales, but when my dad's health deteriorated, I took over the family farm. I'm the second son, but my elder brother moved overseas for work. That left me as the only one to continue the family business. I have a sweet and strong-willed fiancé. I fell head over heels for Ellie the moment I saw her working at our regular cafe, and that's how our relationship started. 2 years into dating, she accepted my marriage proposal. So here I am, about to meet Ellie's parents. Gosh, I'm nervous, I mutter, looking up at the luxurious high-rise where Ellie's parents live. Don't worry, Henry. I've already talked to my mom about you. But my dad, well, that's another story. I've heard her father is a stern man who owns a few restaurants. As nervous as I was, I go in and greet them. To my relief, both warmly welcome me. Sorry that we haven't been able to sync our schedules because of my busy work, the father-in-law began, then started elaborating on how well his company was doing. Henry, I hear you're the top performer in sales. You must be making good money, right? Do you have plans on where you want to live in the future? How about moving into this high-rise condo? All I could do was force a smile at the rapid-fire questions. You're being rude to Henry, said the mother-in-law as she served the tea. Thank you. This tea is quite good. The delicious flavor helped ease my tension.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. My brother grows the tea leaves. Our family home has a tea plantation, and they always send us the fresh tea.
The conversation took a lively turn as my mother-in-law and I chatted about the tea. My father-in-law then huffed and said, "The tea plantation, how antiquated. Few households drink tea these days. I wonder when your family home will go out of business." His disparaging remark about her family home left my mother-in-law looking downcast. I had heard somewhere that tea plantations aren't as profitable as they used to be. It's labor-intensive work that requires skill and, above all, manpower. Still, seeing my mother-in-law so disheartened, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. We owe our livelihood to the farmers who work hard to produce our food. We're able to live thanks to the people who grow crops. The same is true for tea. I'm sure many people find comfort in the delicious taste of this tea. At my words, my father-in-law scowled. I seemed to have put him in a bad mood. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I took a deep breath and blurted out, "I've decided to quit my job and take over the family farm. I've decided to protect the land that's been passed down through the generations. Ellie has accepted this, so please, support us in the future." The moment I announced that I had taken over the farm, my father-in-law's face turned red with anger. "A farmer? I agreed to meet you because you were the top-performing sales guy. Ellie, did you lie to me?" My father-in-law, his face filled with anger, turned to Ellie. "I've tried to talk to you about this many times, but you were too busy. Besides, Mom supports our decision," Ellie said, sighing. She must have known it would come to this. Upon hearing that I had switched from my job to farming, my father-in-law's attitude changed dramatically. It was a parade of prejudice against farmers. How dare a poor person living in an old house talk about getting married? It's embarrassing to tell people that my daughter's husband is a farmer and so on. When asked what I was growing, I answered mainly cherry tomatoes, and he exclaimed, "Cherry tomatoes? They don't seem to make much money and There's no future in them. Of course, we're growing more than just tomatoes. I tried to explain, but my father-in-law cut me off and started laughing. Growing a variety of vegetables is proof that you're not making a profit. He dismissed whatever I said. My father-in-law started a restaurant business at a young age and was successful, so he's particular about profits. Although I've just taken over the farm, I've certainly been considering profits. But as I tried to discuss this, my father-in-law shook his head dismissively. He didn't expect much from me. I'd like to see what life as a farmer is like. Is your house a shack? Are your parents wearing overalls and straw hats while working? Maybe I should meet them next time. I was getting angry at him making fun of my house and parents, but the one who protested angrily was Ellie. I can't believe you're making fun of farmers. I'm ashamed to be your daughter. At Ellie's words, my father-in-law was enraged and slapped her on the cheek. My mother-in-law was angry that he had raised his hand against her daughter. Ellie, with tears from the pain, turned the situation into complete chaos. You're living in this high-rise condo thanks to me. Be grateful. I don't care who a daughter like you marries. I took Ellie, who was sobbing, and left my in-laws' house. I couldn't forgive my father-in-law for making fun of farming and for hitting Ellie. Hello, it's Henry. I'll be bringing my fiancée and her parents next time. I called my father and reported every word of my father-in-law's remarks. He runs restaurants, doesn't he? What's the name of it? He asked, so I told him my father-in-law's name and the name of the restaurants he runs. I have an idea, so wait for me. I asked what he meant by an idea, but he said he was still uncertain and hung up the phone. After a while, my father called back. After hearing from my father, I immediately went to meet some people. Later, Ellie and I went to greet my mother-in-law again. She apologized for my father-in-law's arrogant attitude. He had apparently become arrogant since his restaurant business took off. He moved into a high-rise condo to show off to people around him and began to look down on those who earned less than him. It was a daily occurrence for him to ridicule her family's tea farm. His affairs with women were not hidden, and he did as he pleased, according to my mother-in-law. She said she endured it all for her daughter. I don't want to cause trouble for Ellie and Henry by getting a divorce. My mother-in-law is a kind person who thinks of Ellie and me. Don't worry about us. Please think of your own happiness. When I said that, she thanked me and smiled. I want to help my brother who inherited our family's tea farm. I don't want to see the farm that has been handed down for generations go out of business. You reminded me of the importance of tea farm, Henry. So I'm going to divorce him and go back to my parents' home. It seemed that my mother-in-law's resolution is already made. The day came when I took my in-laws to my parents' home. After getting off the airplane, we drove for another hour. There were vast fields and farms around us. I can't believe there are houses where people live in such a rural area. My father-in-law spat out in the car. Ellie and my mother-in-law obviously looked uncomfortable, but patient, probably because he could say he wanted to go home if a quarrel started here. I'm looking forward to see the life of a farmer. Is the toilet outside or something? My father-in-law ridiculed my home, laughing uproariously. You'll see when we get there. After driving a while, we saw a large gate and high walls. I'm back. I brought everyone with me. When I spoke to the intercom, the gate opened automatically. What a grand gate! Oh, and the garden is so beautiful! Ellie followed me, cheerfully praising the scenery. We leave the garden to a gardener, but it's an English garden, so it's called. Because of my parents who love Europe, there were many of my mother's favorite roses planted. My mother-in-law entered the garden and happily sniffed the scent of the roses. My father-in-law grumbled that it was a bad taste garden. Please, this way. There's a large building beyond the large garden. That is my family home. The brick-built house has 12 rooms and living, dining, kitchen. It's quite spacious. In front of the entrance, there are 2 luxury cars and 3 off-road motorcycles parked. All the land around our house is our own farmland. My in-laws and Ellie were all agape. My parents greeted us at the entrance. Looking at my father-in-law, they showed a smile. Of course, they are not wearing overalls. When I entered the living room, there were relatives and some people gathered. Not only my parents, but everyone was dressed in suits. My father-in-law, insisting that formal attire is unnecessary when meeting farmers, had come in his usual attire of a t-shirt and jeans. Because my mother-in-law, Ellie, and I were dressed relatively formally, he stood out significantly. Hello. Perhaps feeling out of place? My father-in-law said in a small voice, looking down in embarrassment. My father introduced them to the relatives. This is Ellie, Henry's fiancée, and these are Ellie's parents. It seems like Ellie's father has quite a prejudice against farmers. Were you surprised to see that our home was not a shabby hut? The gaze the relatives cast upon my father-in-law was cold. It seemed that my father-in-law had told everyone the story I had told him. No, I mean, that's not... As my father-in-law stammered. Several men stepped forward. Why are you guys here? My father-in-law looked surprised with widened eyes. We are disappointed in you, one of the men said, looking at my father-in-law. These men were organic farmers who were actually supplying vegetables to the restaurants my father-in-law runs. Hearing the name of the store, my father made connections and contacted these farmers. My father, who has been a farmer for many years, has many acquaintances. I had directly met them and conveyed my father-in-law's remarks. Apparently, my father-in-law had always been arrogant, and there were many complaints. Those who were outraged that he looked down on farmers so much had come today to directly voice their complaints. We would like to terminate our business relationship at the end of the next contract. Everyone nodded when one of the farmers said this. Wait a minute. Our specialty is organic vegetables. My father-in-law runs several Italian restaurants featuring vegetables popular among the women. Despite this, I thought it was unbelievable to make fun of the farmers who produce the vegetables. I guess, for him, anything is fine as long as it makes a profit. He had set his sights on organic vegetables because he thought dumb women should bite if he touted them as healthy food. While my father-in-law was flustered at being told they wanted to stop trading, he is a businessman. He seemed to think that the farmers would also be in trouble if the contract ends. Are you sure about this? You're gonna lose your income, you know. Perhaps he regained his composure and began to threaten, acting high and mighty. Don't worry about that, I interjected, anticipating that my father-in-law would say something like this. The farmers had said they wanted to quit dealing with my father-in-law's company, but they would be in trouble if their source of income decreased. Through my sales job, I had made connections with so many people in various industries. Among them were many restaurant owners and food manufacturers. Even if they extended the deal with my father-in-law, I had introduced them to the next place they could do business, so they wouldn't be in trouble. When I told this fact, my father-in-law visibly started trembling. What am I supposed to do if I can't get vegetables? To my father-in-law, who held his head in his hands, my father said this. Why not ask Henry? We also grow organic vegetables. Despite the ridicule from my father-in-law, we had started focusing on organic farming in our fields, including cherry tomatoes. As a result of repeated improvement in the variety, we were able to harvest quite sweet vegetables. We even had several invitations from companies wanting to contract with us. My father-in-law quickly turned to me, but I just smiled and said, "Of course, we refuse to do business." He slumped his shoulders and fell silent. Next to the quietened father-in-law, my mother-in-law and our parents were having a lively conversation.
"When I bring the fresh tea from my hometown next time,"
my mother-in-law declared, as my parents were thrilled. In the car on the way back, my father-in-law exploded in anger. "How dare you cancel the deal? Do you want my business to go bankrupt?" He was shouting from the back seat. Frankly, I couldn't care less about what happens to his restaurants. "And you, as my wife, not even defending me. This is why I hate country women." Perhaps because I was completely ignoring him, his anger turned towards my mother-in-law.
"Sure, you prefer city women, right? Your current favorite is Mary, isn't it?"
When my mother-in-law calmly started talking, the car fell silent.
"Henry paid to hire a detective. You didn't hide it at all, so the evidence was easy to obtain. Please take care of the divorce documents and the alimony payments."
My father-in-law turned pale at her words. "Divorce? What are you saying? How do you plan to survive without my earnings?" She told him she planned to work on the tea farm her brother inherited after the divorce. Then my father-in-law smirked and said, "Isn't that tea farm on the verge of bankruptcy? Fine, I'll divorce you. It's better to live with a young woman than an aging wife." Then, no one spoke a word, and a heavy silence filled the car. When we arrived at the airport, not wanting to be together any longer, my father-in-law headed towards the gate alone. Ellie, looking at her father's back, muttered sadly, "To think such a man as my father." "I think your father will definitely regret his choice," I said, pulling Ellie's shoulder towards me. A few days later, my in-laws' divorce was finalized. Due to the evidence of his affair, he was fully liable. He seemed to have nearly forced my mother-in-law, saying, "I'll give you money, just leave." Ellie and I were angry when we heard the story, but my mother-in-law was laughing, saying it was okay since she got a lot of money. $50,000 in alimony from my father-in-law, and $15,000 in alimony from his mistress. She plans to use this money to revive the tea farm. While my father-in-law was enjoying himself at his high-rise condo with his mistress, her husband barged in, turning the place into a battlefield. Yes, my father-in-law's mistress was a married woman. We had known that when we had the detective investigate, so we thought it wouldn't end well. My father-in-law, who was also being sued for alimony by his mistress's husband, must have learned his lesson about women. Even after that, it seems like he's still living alone in his high-rise condo. His bad reputation spread among the farmers, and the number of farms willing to do business with him drastically decreased. That led him to close his branches, which were centered around organic vegetables. Perhaps feeling lonely, I heard that letters from my father-in-law occasionally arrive at my mother-in-law's parents' house. The content is pathetic, asking her to come back because he's lonely. At first, my mother-in-law was reading the letters, but now she says she just throws them away without opening them. Once he called, she cut him off, saying,
"If you're lonely, why don't you move out of the high rise?"
We laughed when we heard that from her. We don't know whether he couldn't stand living alone in a large room or whether his business went under and he couldn't afford to live in the high rise anymore. But we heard that he moved to a small apartment. I've been extremely busy since I took over the farm, but having Ellie with me is a big support. She probably never thought she'd become a farmer's wife when we were dating. Yet she came with me without a word of complaint, so I have nothing but gratitude for her. I think I like farming. It must be my mom's blood. Ellie, laughing, is adorable. A year later, we had our wedding. It was a grand ceremony, but my father-in-law was not there. He must be sad that he couldn't attend his only daughter's wedding. From my mother-in-law, we received freshly packed new tea, saying she wanted us to serve it to the guests. Thanks to my mother-in-law's help, the tea farm, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, seemed likely to turn a significant profit. Their tea is still fragrant and delicious as always.